Okay, one of the most important things as it comes to a website is the navigation. Um, Going in, making sure that your links are working and making sure that your pages are accessible from other pages. Now, one of the things is most people, if they're just creating a simple website, they're just going to go in and type in the links to their basic pages on that part, and that's all right on that. But you also have to sit down and think how the user is going to access your navigation bar, and especially for a multi-page website. Then it becomes more important of planning. That's where a flowchart comes in play. So you can basically a sitemap that helps you indicate where the pages are going to be linked to and so forth, and then you can see which level of pages are going to be the same level and that. And they talk about that, especially when it starts working with website plans. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to go in and not just work with links, but I want to stylize it. I want to go in and use CSS to help us make the navigational area stand out on that part. So on the website I've been using in my other videos, I have right up here, I have standard links within my nav section. So right here it says home, about, products, and right now it's defaulted to the default colors, blue being the link itself, purple being the visited link. Right now, if I keep the way it is with the background, the way, the darker gray background, it's very hard to see. So what we want to do is we want to add some styling and try to make it stand out a little bit more. And we'll do that by manipulating certain parts of the code and adding style sheets to that. So if I look at the code right now, I have in my coding here, I have a nav section. I have the closing nav, and everything inside it is my links on that. Now, as you look here, I don't have page links to every page. That's fine because sometimes you don't know what the page name is going to be. So I simply place in quotation marks here, and then I'll add that in later on that. So again, that's something that if you don't know what the page names are, don't put the page names in until you know it, because then you're gonna have to go back and change for that for each of the parts of that page itself. Sorry about that. So the nav section itself is going to control my main navigation bar. And right now, if I look at my style sheet, I just want to take a look. Right now, you'll notice the width is set to 960 and the height is set to 550, or I'm sorry, 50 pixels. And of course, the background is added. That's that gray color. So when you really have to look at your section here, and since I'm using a fixed size, then this becomes important because you can't change the font size to be too large. If it does, then you won't be able to fit within that section. And then the other aspect is I like to go in, add a little extra space in between my links so it's easier to review and read. And so 960 is the main width there, so it might come and come into play that if I had too much space, it might not fit all in that one nav section. Now, also keep in mind too, if I was going to do more of a hybrid layout, which is more fluid and fixed together, I might be working with media queries here. So that way I have one for my desktop, I have one for my like phone, and so I would set up a media query that basically says, okay, if my screen is less than 480, then I'm going to have my navigation set up separately. Because usually when you work with nav sections on a mobile device, you're not going to have it go horizontally across. Typically, you'll see most common examples are going to have a vertical look, and it's going to be nice larger buttons on that. So let's take a look at our anchor tags that we have here. And anchor tags are considered inline elements. I talked about this in a previous video. So they do not add any space above or below the content as a H1 tag does or a paragraph tag. Now, if we take a look at the anchor, all these anchor tags I have here in my navigation bar, it's essentially is a list. So if you take a look at that, it's really just a list of pages, right? So one way we can do this, and it's going to make it better, a little bit more of a better sense, is to set this up actually as a list. So what you're going to do is you want to wrap those anchor tags within a list. Semantically, it makes more sense on that. So with the addition of lists, it provides other additional elements that we can use for in CSS, because anchor tags, as we consider, are um, inline elements. So if we can go in and make it more of a block element, and that we can actually create those button styles that you see on the website. Now, if you leave it as an anchor tag and you leave it as an inline element, it's very hard to do, because we need to control the padding, the margins, and the border. And you only can do that with a block element. So lists are widely used. Um, when we work with navigation bar, and of course you could use like a paragraph tag to do this, but I haven't seen that done and used that way in a long time. So list is better sense on this. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a unordered list, and then I'm going to make every anchor tag, each of these lines here, into a list item. So all I did here is I put the UL tag up the top, and then I basically went in and each of the anchor tags I put the list items. So the list item is going to go first because I want the anchor tag inside the list item. Okay, so make sure you recognize where the closing tags are and the opening tags. It does become important on that. Now, let's view this page in the browser. When we view it, it now goes vertical, the navigation bar, and you have bullets. Well, that's what a list item does. When you go and create a list, it's going to add space above and below the list item. So it's because it's a block element. And it has a navigation bar, or I'm sorry, a bullet button on that. So what we want to do here is we want to basically go in and remove some of the styling that's already part of the list. So I want to remove the bullet, and I also want to make it or horizontal instead. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to basically add a style that's going to affect. It's going to affect the list within the nav section, and so I'm going to do nav space UL. I'm going to put my curly brackets in, and within that, first all I want to do is I want to remove the space that's automatically added to the top, bottom, left, and right. And so I'm going to do is basically say margin colon 0. And I'm also going to go in and say padding colon 0. This is going to remove the spacing that is basically inherent to the list itself. So we're removing that. And so basically we're going in and say, okay, I don't want it to be indented. I don't want the space above and below. So if I go in and save this at this point, and I bring this over and I refresh, you will see that the navigation bar over here goes to the left, and the bullets are still there. It's very hard to see. So we just basically stripped away all that extra spacing. Now while we're here, I'm going to also go in and remove the bullets. I'm going to remove the bullets, and I do that with list style hyphen type, and I say none. If I view that in the browser, the bullets will be gone, which is great on that part. Now, what I want to do is I want to get the list items side by side. So list items are, again, a block element. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, in my nav section, I want to go in and find all my list items, and I'm going to tell it to display inline. That basically is changing the element from a block element to an inline element. So now let's view the page. So I click refresh, and you can see that it's now going just like it was in the beginning. It's going side by side from each other on that part. And then now there's no bullets. No bullets. So this converted the block element to inline and also removed the space above and below the LI items. So you can also use the float option in your style rule, um, but if we're changing to inline, there's no need to. So you'll see a lot of examples used for float option. Now let's focus in on our anchor tag to help us stylize it. This is where most of the formatting is going to be done on that. So right now the links are side by side, so we're going to add some spacing and we're going to make the text larger to make it easier to read. So we're going to force space between the links by adding margins to the left and right side of the anchor tag. So in this case, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to focus in on the nav section, list item, space A. Now what I'm doing here is I'm telling it to focus in on the anchor tags that are basically nested in the list item. So that way it's only affecting that one section. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to simply just add a little margin hyphen left, 15 pixels, margin hyphen right. I'm going to keep it even space, so I want to make sure I have the same space on the left and right hand side. Then I'm going to add font size, and I'm going to go in and make it like 18 pixels. This is where you sometimes have to experiment based on the size of your nav section. I like it to make it when I'm working with navigation, not all the time, but I like my navigational links to be in uppercase. So I'll use text hyphen transform, uppercase, one word. I'm also going to make the font weight to be bold. So I want it to be bold so it stands out. I'm going to save it and let's view this. So I've refreshed. As you can see here, the font is a little bit larger, it's bold, and you can see the space in between. Now that underline is by default. It's added to any link. So I want to remove that underline because I think it's distracting me at this time. So I'm going to add this to the anchor tag and I'm going to say text hyphen decoration and I just say none. Now when I save this, I'm going to review this and you see that underline disappears. Now let's focus in on changing the colors because the colors do not match my golf website. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to have styles that's going to affect the actual length as you see it, when you visited the page, so it's a different color, when you bring your mouse over the link, and when it's active. Okay, so I'm going to put this within our style sheets. So I'm going to use the colon link, colon visited, colon hover, and colon active to go in and control the states, the styling of each of the link states. Okay, right now I'm just going to use color, but you can also change the font weight. You can choose the font face. You can choose any styling to add to it. Now, one thing you want to make sure that you're aware of, you need to put it in the exact order. You have to start with link, visited, hover, or active. Now, if you only want link and visited, that's fine, but you have to have it in that order. If not, it's not going to work correctly. Some browsers it does, I've seen, but in most browsers it will not work if you don't have it in the direct steps that we need here. So let's save the style sheet, come back over and refresh. So now you can see that it's like, for example, the gray and white. Now if I bring my mouse over, there's the hover effect that's gone to the white area. Okay, so again, we're just changing the colors to have it fit more with my theme. Now, by default, the links are added to the top of the nav section. I want to force some space so the navigation is within the middle of the nav area. So this is, remember, the height of the nav section is 50 pixels. I want to move the entire group down. So I'm going to apply a style to the UL tag on that. So and when I do so, it's basically is the main grouping of the list items. So I'm going to have the whole list forced down, so I'm going to apply it to the UL tag. So I'm going to go back to my style sheet. I'm I'm going to come up here to Nav UL, and I'm just going to add some space to the top. And in this case, I'm going to do padding hyphen top. I'm going to do around 15 pixels. Now, we already have the padding set to 0, so that removes it. That removes and strips the UL. So then what I want to do is I want to put it after. Now, if this makes more sense, I'll put it right after this. Because what I'm doing is I'm basically going in and saying I want this to be the space. So I'm physically controlling it. So I'm removing what's inherent already added, and then I'm adding mine. And so remember, with padding, padding is going to be the space between the content and the border of your section. And since we now have a UL block element there, then there's always that invisible border that goes around the whole element. So that's where the padding at the top is going to be forcing that space down. So let's save this, let's refresh, and see how it moves it down. So we've added 15 pixels at the top there, and it's forcing it right down to the bottom. Now, again, you can start experimenting with this. Once you have your basic structure set in place, then you can start adding additional styles. That's going to help you out. So again, don't be afraid to go and start experimenting once you have the main style set rules in place. So if you want to say, hey, let's try something down here with the anchor tag. Let's change the font face. Let's make it italics. Any of the styles that you want to apply to the other elements, it can work here. If you want to change this, if you want to go back in and experiment with the colors, especially like the hover effect and that, you can do so. So this gives you a basic idea of how to set up your navigation bar. And now it's your turn to make it your own and be able to add your own styles.